Our first oval-holed instrument.
Yes, now, I should point out that while we have a preponderance of F-holes behind us, it is coincidence only. There's no malice aforethought, if you will, behind this. This is another instrument by Canadian luthier Doug Woodley. This is to a point, a very faithful recreation of Marilyn Mayer's legendary Lion and Healy mandola, built in the late teens. Doug took very exacting measurements of the instrument in all respects and essentially recreated it. There are several departures from original design, though they're not hugely significant. The headstock, for instance, is a more deco-inspired version of a paddle headstock, if you will, as opposed to the violin scroll headstock that the original holds. There are a few other minor departures from the original Lion and Healy. The tailpiece, obviously, is different. Lion and Healy is famous for those huge, wonderfully engraved nickel-silver tailpieces that are just a glory to behold. The Lion and Healy pickguards were made of vulcanized rubber, and so the texture is different. There is an argument they produce a different sound, but that's in another arena in a sense. But for the most part, Doug has adhered to the aesthetic design, and then most critically in terms of the carving of the instrument, this is a Lion and Healy to all intents and purposes. And it's worth taking a long and lingering look at the materials that Doug chose for this. Quilted maple back and sides of just extraordinary beauty.
That's absolutely beautiful. It looks like it actually has texture to it.
It does. That's
like
one of the
a velvet throw or a velvet blanket almost.
Mm-hmm. It's got a very soft quality to it. It's hard to go too far in describing this. Bound in ebony and pear again. Attention to detail simply exquisite.
Now, Lion and Healy set out to obviously capture, at the turn of the century when there was a huge mandolin craze, I mean, everybody had a mandolin, and even working women in factories who couldn't afford a mandolin would often go out and buy mandolin cases, so that, because it was the appearance, and you had this mandolin case that you would carry around. So it was a very, very, very big mandolin boom turn of the century. So Lion and Healy, to attempt to capture at least part of the market that Gibson had wrapped up, set out to compete with them in the same arena, if you will, but by offering something a little bit different as well.
Oh, so certainly. And I think that was the intention with so many of the many builders at the time. Everybody wanted to offer something slightly different. Gibson, I think, was acknowledged as the leader in the marketplace. Lion and Healy came to it from a very specifically violinistic aesthetic sense, which they translated in a variety of ways. But this was clearly, I have to believe, an appeal to the classical sensitivities. The fact that the instrument smacked so much of the violin would suggest that clearly this is a superior choice for a classical player. And interestingly, to this day, the Lion and Healy design remains the instrument of choice among classical mandolinists. For whatever reason, Lion and Healy was successful. The company, unfortunately, no longer builds them. I think they ceased building mandolins in the
I think all the F5s are in the hands of bluegrass players anyway, aren't they?
All the F5s?
Well, most of them. So.
All the Lion and Healy F5s. I'd like to see one of those. Clearly this has a different voice than does the Duff H5 modeled on the Gibson H5, but a wonderful voice nonetheless.
sounding.